Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So inshallah today we will be covering chapter 5, which is Noon Sakinah and Tanween rules. We will cover the definition of Noon Sakinah, the definition of Tanween, and then the 4 rules of Noon Sakinah: al-idhar, al-idgham, al-iqlab, or it's also called qalb, and al-ikhfa. Alright, so the definition of Noon Sakinah. The definition of Noon Sakinah is that it is a noon that does not have any one of the 3 diacritical marks. So it does not carry a fatha, a kasra, or a dhamma. That also includes a fathatain, a kasratain, a dhammatain, or a shadda fatha, or a shadda kasra, or a shadda dhamma. And sukoon on the noon is permanent, which basically means that the sukoon will remain whether we are continuing our recitation or whether we're stopping on that word. So to give you an example, for example, when we stop at the end of the first ayah of Surah Al-Fatiha. So we would say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And we're stopping on that noon. However, that is not considered a permanent sukoon. Why is that not a permanent sukoon? Because if we were to continue and not stop at the end of the ayah, we would say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. And we would pronounce the fatha that is written on that noon. Okay, so that's considered a temporary sukoon, and what we are dealing with today is noon when it has a permanent sukoon. Any questions about what it means that the sukoon is permanent or temporary? Good? Okay. All right, now what is the definition of tanween? Basically, tanween is a noon sakina, but it is not a noon at-tawkeed or the noon of emphasis. It is attached to nouns. It is never attached to verbs or particles. It does not apply when 2 sakin letters are adjacent to each other. So, for example, when we have in, I believe, Surah Al-Qiyamah, when we have يَوْمَ إِذٍ الْمَسَاقِ, right? So the way that we read that is يَوْمَ إِذٍ الْمَسَاقِ, because the Noon Sakinah and the Tanween is meeting with the Lam Sakinah. And because there are 2 sakin letters, the Noon must take a kasra. And in this case, it is no longer a Noon Sakinah. Okay? So it is only pronounced when joining, and it is not pronounced when one stops at the word. So what this means is, for example, if you stop on the word alimun, we say alim, and there is no indication about whether that is a dhamma or dhammatain, right? And that is basically what that means, is that when, for example, if you were to stop on a noon sakina, which is not within a tanween, that noon would be pronounced. However, when it's within a tanween, it gets dropped, and that's just a sukoon. So we'll look more closely at the difference between noon sakina and tanween. Noon Sakinah could come in the middle or the end of word. So you have noon, you can say al-anhar, right? So that is coming in the middle of a word. Or you can say, or just the word min or the word men, where it's coming at the end of a word. In the case of tanween, it can only come at the end of a word. Okay, so we can say kitabun or bahrun, the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they, in certain cases, they carry tanween at the end. So you will never see a tanween in the beginning or the middle of a word. A noon sakina can be in nouns, particles, and verbs. Tanween only comes in nouns. Noon sakina is pronounced whether one continues or stops. Tanween is only pronounced while continuing. This last point, I will explain it, inshallah, and if somebody doesn't understand it, please do ask questions now. So, Noon Sakinah is a part of the original word. Okay, what does that mean? That means that if we, let's say we have the word an'amta, and we replace the noon with something else, or we don't say the noon, the word will completely change. It is no longer the same word, right? It's as if in English you take a word and you substitute one of the letters in the middle of the word with another letter. So that will no longer remain the same word, right? It will no longer have the same meaning. However, tanween is different. How is tanween different? Because, for example, in Arabic, there's a rule that a noun cannot have al and tanween at the same time, right? So you can say al kitabu or you can say kitabun. You can't say al kitabun. So the fact that when we say al kitabu, that the tanween gets dropped, we know that that noon that's in the tanween is not a part of the structure of the word. Okay, so between al-kitabu and kitabun, yes, there is some difference in meaning, a very slight difference in meaning. However, it doesn't actually change the meaning from it being a book to it being a rock, right? For example, however, if you were to change a Noon Sakinah, which is within a word, if you were to change that into another letter or to drop it, you would completely change the meaning of a word. Is that clear? Alhamdulillah. All right. So let's begin, inshallah, with the first rule. The first rule is al-idhar. And the definitions that we're going to be giving here are, you'll notice they're very general, right? And they don't necessarily specifically mention a noon. And the reason for that is that you're going to meet these words again next month, inshallah, when we do the chapter on Mim Sakina. So the definitions are very broad because they cover all different kinds of ilhar, but then today we will cover specifically ilhar noon sakina. So what is al-idhar? Al-idhar is when the letter in question originates from its makhraj without any added nasal sound, stopping, breathless stop, or emphasis on the letter that is to be read clearly. Okay, so basically there's nothing changing for that letter. You are simply reading it the way you would read it if it had a sukun. That's it. Okay, that's al-idhar. And in this case, we are dealing with noon sakina. Okay, next month we'll deal with al-idhar al-shafawi, which is basically dealing with mim sakina. Okay, any questions about the definition of al-idhar? Alhamdulillah. Alrighty. So the letters of al-idhar are hamza, ha, ain, ha, ghain, kha. What does it mean that these are the letters of al-idhar? Okay, what it basically means, what we're dealing with here is that noon sakina has a relationship with every single letter in the alphabet. All right, so depending on what its relationship is with the letter that's coming after it is how you will pronounce it. All right, so when we say these are the letters of al-idhar, it means that if noon sakina is followed by one of these 6 letters, then the noon will be pronounced clearly without any added nasal sound or a breathless stop or any kind of stopping or any kind of extra emphasis. All right, so what do these 6 letters have in common? They're all the letters of the throat. All right, now why do we make the noon clear when it's followed by one of the letters of the throat? It's because the makhraj of the noon is the tip of the tongue, right? And there is the sound of gunna coming from the nasal cavity. And these 6 letters are basically letters of the throat, which are very far away from the makhraj of the noon. So it would be, it wouldn't be difficult, but it would be an added, you would have to make an extra effort, and it would be burdensome to make a gunna when noon sakina is followed by one of these 6 letters. So the way that you can memorize these, you can either memorize them as hamza, ha, ain, ha, ghain, kha, or you can memorize them in the phrase akhi haka ilman hazahu ghayru qasid. It's up to you, but you should have them memorized in one way or the other. Inshallah, that will make it easier for you when you're trying to figure out how to read the noon sakina. Another benefit of memorizing them as hamza, ha, ain, ha, ghain, kha is that this is the order in which they come in the throat, starting from hamza at the bottommost part of the throat and the kha at the very top. Any questions about the rule of al-idhar? Good? Okay. So examples would be words like anhu. anhu, ayn fatha, noon sakina, and then ha, anhu. Or another example would be al-anhar, where you have noon sakina followed by ha in that word. Okay, or the word an'amta, noon sakina followed by ayn in that word. So the noon is being read clearly, and there is nothing extra being added to it. Okay, so there are three levels of al-idhar, and they are based on basically how far a letter is from the makhraj of the noon. So ulya, which is the highest level, you would say, are hamza and ha, because they are farthest from the makhraj of the noon. Wusta, which is like the middle level, are ayn and ha, because they are closer than the other two letters. And then dunya, ghayn and kha, are from the letters of the throat, but they're the closest to the makhraj of the noon. And this is just a small interesting note, which is that in the riwayah of Imam Abu Ja'far, you actually do make gunna when noon sakina is followed by ghayn and kha, because they are closer to the makhraj of the noon, and therefore it is easier to do that. But in Hafs, we don't have that. In Hafs, there is only idhar. Okay. Now we're moving on to al-idgham. Idgham is defined linguistically as merging or inserting. Its applied tajweed definition is the meeting of a non-vowel letter with a vowel letter so that the two letters become one emphasized letter of the second kind. Okay, so two letters are basically meeting, and the first one is getting lost and going into the second one. All right, so the reason why there's a little asterisk here, and this may or may not be of interest to all of you, is that this definition is specifically for Hafs and most of the other Qurra. In the riwayah of Imam Susi from Abu Amr, there is actually idgham between voweled letters as well. Okay, that's just something to know. You don't have to actually take down your notes or anything. Okay, so letters of idgham. So now we know the letters of al-idhar. So we know that there are 6 letters with which noon has a particular relationship, which is that noon basically does absolutely nothing. He's just himself. The way I describe it is that they are kind of like they live in the next village over. So he doesn't necessarily have a relationship with them. He just looks at them, says hello, moves on. That's it, right? The letters of al-idgham, you could say, are the ones who are closer to noon. Okay, and because they are close to noon, and in some cases it's noon himself, these are, you could say, the ones that he has quite a close relationship with, and so lam and ra are, some scholars say that they come from the same makhraj as the noon, and we see here that they are distinguished in the way that noon deals with them, because when noon sakina is followed by lam and ra, there is absolutely no gunna, and there is a complete merging into these two letters. So for example, when we have the words min rabbihim, we say mir rabbihim, or when we have the words yakun lahu, it becomes yakul lahu, or man lam becomes man lam. So the noon is as if it's not even there. It's a complete merging. Okay, so then the other 4 that are left, because there are 6 letters, yarmalun, lam and ra we've dealt with. Yanmu are the 4 letters with noon does merge into them. However, the gunna remains. Okay, or the gunna becomes exaggerated, because especially in the case of noon and mim. Okay, so last time we learned the degrees of gunna. So the degree of gunna when noon sakina merges with noon and noon sakina merges with mim is higher than when noon sakina merges with ya and when noon sakina merges with waw. But in both cases, there will be a gunna, a nasal sound that will come. Okay, any questions about this so far? About idgham, the concept of merging between 2 letters, and why yarmalun is split up into 2 parts and how those 2 sets of letters are different. All right, inshallah. Okay, so now we're going to look at those same letters in a different way, okay? And I want you guys to, this can be a little confusing. So basically what this is a set of letters, and we're thinking about it firstly in this way, with gunna, without gunna. And then we're thinking about it in a completely different way. So think of don't think of these two charts as being related to each other, except in the fact that they're dealing with the same letters. Okay, and that will inshallah help you to understand this better. Okay, so idgham naqis, or we would say an incomplete idgham, an incomplete merging of the letter noon, is its merging with waw and ya. Why? Because it loses its makhraj, where the tongue is no longer touching the makhraj of the noon, but it does not lose its quality of gunna. Okay, so when we say min waraihim wa man ya'mal, we're still maintaining the gunna of the noon, but the makhraj is lost. In the case of idgham kamil, even in the case of noon and mim, where the gunna is remaining, the gunna is coming because of the second letter. Okay, the noon itself is completely merged, especially in the case of like mim, where the noon, the makhraj is completely lost. Okay, so in lam and ra, that I've noticed that for students in lam and ra, they're able to see how that's idgham kamil, because the noon is completely lost, its gunna is, and so is its makhraj. But in the case of mim and noon, sometimes it's more difficult for them to understand that. But in the case of mim and noon as well, the noon is completely gone, but the letters that it's merging into have gunna as an inherent quality in them. Okay, but that we would call idgham kamil, and this we would call idgham naqis. You will see these terms again when we talk about other kinds of idgham between letters, idgham mutamathilain, mutajanisain, mutaqaribain, etc. Okay, now in the Uthmani Mus'haf, and we will talk about this at the end as well, idgham noon sakina is indicated by a shadda on the letter after the noon sakina. So there is a built-in clue, you could say. So when you have a noon sakina or tanween that is merging into the letter after it, they will put a shadda on that letter. That shadda does not mean that there are two of that letter. Okay, usually shadda means that there's two letters, right? But in this case, it is an indication of idgham, not an indication of there being two letters there. Okay. All right. Exceptions. So al-idhar, the rule that we covered previously, can come between two words, or it can come within a word. Right. However, idgham can only come between two words. It cannot come within a word. Right. Idgham noon sakina can only come between two words. There are other kinds of idgham that happen within words. So therefore, and there are only 4 words in the Quran where this could even be possible. So most of the words in the Quran do not have this possibility of a noon sakina being followed by one of the letters of yad maloon within a word. However, there are 4 words: dunya, bunyan, sinwan, and qinwan. It will be good to memorize them. In the Arabic language, there's another word, unwan, which you don't see in the Quran, but it's good to know that word as well. So we would not say this as dunya or bunyan or sinwan or qiwan. We would simply pronounce the noon as normal. Dunya, bunyan, sinwan, qinwan. Why? Because idgham can only happen between 2 words, and this is within a word. Now there's another ayah in the Quran where it may seem a little confusing as to, is this a one word or is this multiple words? So when we have in the beginning of Surah Al-Qasas, we have ta, sin, mim. These are huruf al-muqatta'at, the separated letters. But the way that we recite it is we say ta, sin, mim. So you don't hear the noon. We don't say ta, sin, mim, right? So now the noon is merging into the mim. So someone could say, well, but that's idgham within a word, right? But that's not actually a word. That's not one word. That's 3 separate letters which are being written together. So in actuality, it looks like this: ta, fatha, alif, ta, sin, mim. So it's still technically idgham between 2 words. Okay? Any questions about this so far? Alhamdulillah. Good. Okay. Alhamdulillah. All right. Now we're going to look at al-qalb or al-iqlab, and this is my favorite rule because it's so easy, which is basically when noon sakina is followed by a ba, the noon turns into a meme. Why? Okay, so I mean, actually, these rules are all very common sense. If you figure out what the relationships letters are with the noon, you will find it very easy to remember them. So we have basically seen letters that noon is very far away from, so it has a very, you could say, polite civil relationship with them. Okay, then there are letters that are very close to noon. Either they share the makhraj, or in the case of meme, they share one of its major sifat, gunna. And the noon has basically merges into them and has a very close relationship with them. Now, in the case of ba, if you think of noon's relationship with ba, they have very little in common. They are neither common in the makhraj, and they may have some sifat that overlap, but it is still not necessarily a very close relationship. Meme is like a mutual friend. Okay, so meme is similar to noon in that they both have gunna, and it is similar to ba in that it shares a similar makhraj. Right? So meme is the perfect, you could say, intermediary between the two. Also, it is physically difficult to say min ba'd, to move from a noon to a ba, and it is much easier to say min ba'd. It's much easier on the tongue. Okay? So this is how we recite this in the Quran, that anytime you have a meme, noon sakina followed by a ba, the noon will turn into a meme. And it's one of the easiest rules to remember because this is the basically the little meme that's written on top of the noon in the mushaf. Okay, so it's not a very it's an easy one, and it's not very difficult to miss. Any questions about what's happening here? Okay, and something to note here. So the ghunna in idgham, when we said that idgham has ghunna on letters, on the yanmu letters, and there, when we say again that there's ghunna in iqlab, that remember the ghunna is always 2 counts. In tajweed, every ghunna, regardless of why it's happening, whether it's happening because of iqlab or idgham or ikhfa, or whether it's ikhfa noon sakina, whether it's ikhfa al-shafawi, or whether it's idgham noon sakina or idgham al-shafawi, all ghunnas are always 2 counts, no more and no less. Okay? So what do we do with the ghunna of qalb? So basically, we're hiding the meme and we're making the ghunna clear. The ghunna has 2 counts, but there is a slight difference of opinion, you could say, regarding the way that this ghunna is done. So I'm going to tell you both opinions. I'm going to tell you which opinion is preferred by my teachers and which seems to be have a lot more scholarly support and dalils with it. So one of the ways that you may have seen a qalb done or iqlab done is with a slight space between the lips. So they'll say min ba'd, min ba'd. And this is mostly common amongst the Egyptian reciters. However, amongst the Shami reciters and some of the greatest shuyukh of Tajweed today, so one of the greatest sheikhs of Tajweed today is Sheikh Ayman Suwaid, who lives in Jeddah. He is a Syrian. They say that no, this is incorrect, and that there is no evidence of this in the older texts of Tajweed. There is no mention of there being any space. And this noon is actually turning into a meme, but how are we going to differentiate it from a meme mushaddada? Because there is also a ghunna, and like for example, on the word thumma or mimma, we're making a ghunna there on a meme. So how is that differentiated from this ghunna? And they say that the way it is differentiated is that for the ghunna of meme mushaddada, there is pressure being applied to the lips while you're making the ghunna. And in this case, there is no pressure being applied. The lips are closed. It is, it's not like mimma. However, there is no space. So it's like mim ba'd. And inna rabbahum bihim, that one that I just did, that's actually ikhfa al-shafawi. However, the method is the same. Okay. Now, how you should do whatever the teacher who you are studying with, whatever they teach you, you should pronounce it that way. But you should know that the other opinion does exist, and if you're reciting on your own, if you're not reciting to a teacher, I would suggest you to use a method in which the lips are closed but not pressed. Okay? All right. Any questions about the method of ghunna on iqlab? And this will also apply to ikhfa al-shafawi, which inshallah we will cover next month. Okay. All right. Now we're at our last rule for Noon Sakinah and Tanween, and this is the rule of al-ikhfa. And the word ikhfa linguistically means hiding or concealing something, right? So this little graphic here, this is us, and this is Noon, hiding. So in Tajweed, the pronunciation of a non-voweled letter stripped of any shadda, characterized somewhere between al-idhar and al-idgham, with a gunna remaining on the first letter, in this case, the Noon Sakina and the Tanween. So this is basically what ikhfa is. Okay, it's something between al-idhar and something between al-idgham, and there is, again, a 2-count gunna. The gunna, however, of ikhfa is slightly more complicated than the gunna of the others, and we'll talk about it a little bit here. So the letters of al-ikhfa, there are 2 ways of remembering the letters of ikhfa. One is the easy way, you could say, which is basically all the rest. Okay, so a lot of times when I'm teaching to teach the little ones, they'll just be like all the rest. That's the one that has like basically the leftover letters, right? So basically we have أخيها كعلم حازه غير قاصر for إظهار. We have يرملون for إدغام. We have باء for إقلاب, and so all the rest are the letters of إخفاء. However, the proper way of remembering the letters of إخفاء is to memorize this phrase, which is in تحفة الأطفال. صف ذا ثنا كم جاد شخص قد سما دم طيبا زد في تقى ضع ظالما. And if you are a serious student of Tajweed, please do memorize this phrase, because if you are tested by a teacher and you say all the rest, you will not necessarily be considered, especially if the teacher is, somebody from overseas, you will not be considered a very serious student of Tajweed. What they are looking to hear is this phrase. صف ذا ثنا كم جاد شخص قد سما دم طيبا زد في تقى ضع ظالما. Okay, the worst thing you could do is start naming random letters, right? Don't do that. Okay, so I want you guys to look. So I told you some patterns in the other letters. I want you to look at these letters yourself. What pattern do you see here? What is similar about these letters? And basically, this rather long sentence, these are not all the letters of fa, rather it is simply the first letter of each one of these words. So sad, the, tha, kaf, jim, sheen, qaf, sin, dal, ta, za, fa, ta, da, and dha. What do you see that's similar about all of these letters? I'll give you a hint. This letter is an exception. No? Okay. Okay. Oh, the question was, what is the similarity between all of the letters of ikhfa? And I gave a hint that the letter fa is an exception. But other than that, there is something similar between all the letters of ikhfa. They're all letters of the tongue. Okay, so letters of the throat have been omitted, except for fa, the letters of the lips have been omitted, and the ones that are closest to it in makhraj have been omitted, and you are basically left with all the rest, which are letters of the tongue. Okay, they're close enough to noon for us to make a gunna, but they are not necessarily so close that we are going to make an idgham. All right, and fa is the exception here. Okay, now inshallah, let's move on to how we differentiate the gunna of ikhfa. Now the gunna of ikhfa, there are 15 letters of ikhfa. There are 15 different gunnas of ikhfa. Okay, and how do we determine the gunna of ikhfa? So in this case, it's showing you the degrees of ikhfa in terms of, there are two ways that we split up the letters of ikhfa. One is by the distance from noon. Okay, so the highest degree of ikhfa is a ta, dal, and ta because they're so close to noon. So in this case, hiding the noon would require more effort on the part of the reciter. In the lowest degree of ikhfa, we have qaf and kaf because they are furthest away from the makhraj of the noon, and in the middle we have sad, za, sin, dha, tha, and dha, and jim, sheen, fa, and dad. Another way of splitting them up is based on the tafkhim and the tarqiq of the letters of ikhfa. So when you have noon sakina followed by a dha, a sad, a dad, a qaf, or a ta, you are going to have a heavy gunna, and we will talk about this in just a sec. And when you have noon sakina followed by dha, tha, kaf, jim, sheen, sin, dal, za, fa, or ta, you will have a light gunna. Now, how and why does that happen? It's very simple. The perfect ikhfa, or the best, the most expert ikhfa, is the ikhfa that when it is made, the person who is listening can hear which letter is going to come next. All right? So it is not, when we first teach ikhfa, we simply teach people to make an empty gunna sound. And tell them, keep your tongue lowered, don't touch the makhraj of the noon, and just make a nasal sound. And however, as a reciter progresses and they work towards perfection in their recitation, they have to begin to adjust every single ikhfa for each letter. So for example, the ikhfa of noon sakina with qaf. So yanqalib is different than yansurun, which is different than inṭaliqu, which is different than untha, which is different than أنفسهم, which is different than min ذكر. Okay. So now why the heavy gunna, why the light gunna? It's very simple. Because you have to differentiate. How do you differentiate for each letter? You go close to the makhraj of that letter. Okay, so what you do is your tongue, instead of touching the noon, is going close to the makhraj, or is on the makhraj of the letter that follows. Right? So in the case of fa, your teeth are on the inside of the lower lip as you are making the gunna. أنفسهم. أنفسهم. In the case of tha, dha, and dha, the tip of your tongue is actually touching the bottom edge of the front two teeth, the upper front two teeth. So أنثى من ينظ. Okay. So it is touching the bottom of the front two teeth as you are making the gunna. So one of the things that does not change is the tafkhim and the tarqiq. If you are close to the makhraj of the dha, part of the makhraj of the dha is that the back of the tongue is raised. Otherwise, you will simply have a dha, right? Part of the makhraj of the qaf is that the back of the tongue is raised. Part of the makhraj of the ta is that the back of the tongue is raised. And when the back of the tongue is raised, you have a heavy gunna. All right. And when you have the rest of these letters, for them, the back of the tongue is not raised, and therefore there is a light gunna. Okay. Are there any questions about differentiating between a heavy gunna and a light gunna. Okay, so those were the 4 rules. And now we're just going to discuss some visual clues that are built into the Uthmani Mus'haf. And right here, we're talking about the Mus'haf that is written in the script of Nasq, not the one that's written in Nas Ta'liq, which is the one that's more common in India, Pakistan. So be aware of that these clues do not exist in that Mus'haf. Okay, and that Mus'haf has a clue for iqlab. It has a small meme, and it has it gives you the visual clue of the shadda for idgham, but other than that, it does not give you any clues for idhar and ikhfa, and you are required to know the letters of those rules. Okay, but in the case of the Uthmani Mus'haf, which is more common in the Arab world, there are clues that have been built into the Mus'haf. And these, of course, came afterwards. The Masahib that the Sahaba used and compiled did not have any such clues. Okay, so Al-Idhar in the Uthmani Mus'haf, the reciter has some visual clues. And in this case, we're showing you that the Dhammatain here are inverted. Okay, so in the case of the Noon Sakinah, the sukoon will be clearly written on the Noon. So you will have a Noon with a sukoon written on it, which means that you need to read the sukoon. You need to read this Noon very clearly. Okay, and in the case of the Tanween, the Dhammatain will be inverted like this, and the Fathatain and the Kasratain will be perfectly on top of each other. Okay, there will be no, they won't necessarily be offset. Okay, they'll be like right on top of each other. In the case of idgham, the noon will not have a sukoon on it. So when you have a noon sakina followed by one of the letters of yarmalun, the noon will not have a sukoon on it. Okay, and the dhammatain will be right next to each other like this, and the kasratain and the fathatain will be like this. They will be offset a little bit, so they will not be right on top of each other. Okay, this here is an example of what? Can someone tell me what this is an example of, based on just what you've learned so far about what clues are there in the Uthmani Mus'haf? Idhar, exactly, right? So this is a clue of idhar because the Noon Sakina is clearly written there. Very good, mashallah. All right, now in the case of iqlab, we have the small meme written there, and we have shown you in the case of kalla la yumbadanna, this is a Noon Sakina. They have written no sukoon on the noon, and then there is a little meme. In the case of tanween, one of the vowels of the tanween is dropped, and there's a little meme. Why is that one dropped? Because that one was the noon, and a small meme is placed there. Now, a place where I see people get confused is a lot when you have surahs in the Quran that end with tanween. Oftentimes you will see the little meme there, right? And people get confused as to how to stop there. And why is that little meme there? So little meme is there because if you were to continue, you could join with the basmala, and the basmala begins with the ba. And therefore, the tanween, the noon in the tanween will change to a meme if you were to join it with the ba. Okay? That's what that's for. However, when you stop the way that you would stop on tanween. Okay, so if I were to stop on this word, I would say hammazim masha. That's how I would stop. I would not say, I would not pronounce the meme. I wouldn't say hammazim masha'im. Okay, so that's just something to note, that meme if you see it at the end of a surah, there's no need to pronounce it. There's no difference in how you stop. It is there in case you choose to join the last ayah of that surah with the basmala. Okay. Now, ikhfa. Ikhfa, basically, this is where you have to know your letters, because one of the clue for ikhfa with noon sakina is simply that the noon doesn't have a sukoon, which is the same clue for idgham. Okay, what is the difference? The idgham, for idgham, the noon sakina will have nothing on it. It will be empty, but it will have a shadda on the letter after it. In the case of ikhfa, they will not put a shadda on the letter that comes after it. Okay, and as far as the fathatain, kasratain, dhammatain, they will be the same. They will be offset and not right on top of each other. Okay, so this is, for example, right here, this is an example of how the dhammatain look when it's followed by one of the letters of ikhfa. This is an example of how the kasratain would look. And this, again, is an example of how the kasratain would look. Now, if you notice, sarsarin atiyah, what's going on here? These are different than these ones. They're not offset, they're right on top of each other. What's going on there? Right, it's al-idhar. Exactly. Very good. MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. And then in this one we have min kulli. So if you notice, this noon has nothing on it. Okay, it has no sukoon, and it is completely empty. And that is an example of ikhfa, and it is not idgham because the letter after it does not have a shadda on it. Okay. Alrighty, so inshallah I will stop the recording here, and then you guys can ask any questions that you may have.